Hey folks! After the previous and enjoyable journey across the world of Endiness in The Legend of Dragoon, this month I experienced another classic JRPG for the first time that really surprised me, and of which I really didn't know anything about before playing it. Legend of Legaia. Somehow this game was totally unknown to me, despite being a somewhat appreciated classic with a good fanbase, but seriously, it was like I've never seen it mentioned anywhere. Well, it happened that a friend warmly suggested me to play it, and by chance I even found an NTC copy on sale and bought it on Rust, and then added it to my collection. I'll tell you, at first glance this game is a huge deception. This character design is very generic, and it would never inspire me to play it, but beyond this first impression, this JRPG tells a kind of serious story, set in a world where humanity struggles to survive and mixes tragic events with more light-hearted, adventurous ones. The game opens by telling a creation myth, which says that God created everything, ending with humans, who possessed wisdom and intellect, but they were weak against the wild beasts and lived in constant danger of extinction. For this reason, God created superior beings who would be at the service of men. They were called Seru, or Seru, but I will stick with Seru. The Seru were capable of merging with humans, giving them extraordinary abilities, and thanks to them, humanity created society and prospered. However, that era came to an end, when the Mist appeared out of nowhere and made the Seru violent and mortal enemies of men. From that point, human civilization began to capitulate. Once the prologue is over, the game begins in the village of Rim Elm, where we meet Vahn, the protagonist. Vahn lives with his father and his little sister, and is about to enter adulthood, at just 14 years old. Due to the mist and the violent Seru, the village is surrounded by high walls, and specialized teams of adult hunters are allowed to go out and fetch food for the villagers. In the village also lives a girl in love with Vahn, May, who personally sews him the hunter's robe that he will wear the next day, but that evening something terrible happens. The hunting team returns with a member killed by the Seru. May's father, an event that causes discomfort for everyone. During the night, something very big bangs against the walls, and everyone goes out to check. A mysterious being named Zeto teleports into the village and invites everyone to let themselves be possessed by the mist, and then commands a colossal Seru to destroy the walls, to let the mist and the rogue Seru enter inside. Hey, wait a moment. All this sounds familiar. Holy shit, it's like the beginning of Attack on Titan. Well, kinda. Isayama is indeed a big nerd who maybe played The Legend of Legaia, but perhaps it's just a little coincidence. Who knows? The situation becomes desperate, as people are brutally killed, and besides, the mist spreads and seems to point to the mystical Genesis tree at the center of the village, which begins to glow with mysterious power. By touching the trunk, Vahn comes in contact with an entity called Meta, a Ra-Seru, who offers to merge with him by taking the form of a combat accessory attached to his right wrist, and thus give him great powers. But first, Vahn must revive the Genesis tree. So, with the help of his father, Vahn assembles all the remaining citizens around the old trunk, in prayer, and finally we witness the miracle that banishes the threatful mist. The next morning we attended the funerals of the fallen people of Rim Elm, including my father, Juno, and with this sequence, which I must admit I found very well directed and even a bit touching, ends the prologue of the game. Now, empowered and guided by meta, Vahn begins his adulthood by embarking on a long and epic journey in search of the Genesis trees scattered around the world of Legaia, with the task of reinvigorating them in order to drive away the mist and free people from the control of the rebellious Ra-Seru. Once outside his village, Vahn is now on his own, discovering a world still unknown to him. Despite its simple and deceptive appearance, Legend of Legaia tells a story with more dramatic tones than it seems, just as the prologue has already shown. We'll see often a disparate depiction of humanity that lives hidden and afraid, or under the possession of the Ra-Seru, and we'll also witness tragic and somewhat nasty events. However, Vahn will not be alone in his battle against the mist and its monstrous spawns, because other heroes will also join his mission. And speaking of battles, Legend of Legaia features a very cool and original battle system that boasts the so-called Combat Arts System. In short, the authors created a system of attack combos and unlockable special moves that resembles the fighting games of which they were big fans. At the base, it's a classic turn system, but instead of selecting symbol attacks, we can choose 4 different parts to it: high and low, and right and left, and by combining these directions we unlock special moves called hearts, which inflict high damage and consume art points. An interesting thing is that certain enemies cannot be hit, for example by the low attacks if they are flying, or the high ones if they are too short. It's freaking neat! By using the Spirit command, the fighter concentrates and restores a third of the art points, and extends the gauge for combos for just one use, after which it returns to normal. I kid you not, at the beginning I spent over 1 hour trying to unlock as many hearts as possible just for Vahn, which are then registered in a consultable list. The simpler and most numerous to unlock are the normal hearts, which are followed by the super, the hyper and the miracle ones. But we'll deepen it later. By the way, the world of Legaia is divided in 3 continents, which are discovered one at a time, and I also divide the story in 3 different acts, one for each of them. In the first, called Dry Kingdom, we'll get to know most of the main cast, including the other 2 young heroes that will join Vahn. The first new entry is Noah, a very young girl out of the ordinary, who grew up far from civilization in the company of a wolf who raised her and taught her how to fight and survive. In a cave. No, I'm not joking. I admit that the first time meeting this character was very difficult. I struggled trying to like her because I really don't stand much childish characters. However, Noah's narrative arc will be very important for future developments that I will delve into later, and just like Vahn, she will also merge with a Ra-Seru called Terra. Besides, Noah's entry into the party brought me back to spending hours obtaining new hearts for her. Yes, so much fun. The third and the final member of the party will be this austere and proud fighter, a warrior monk from the Baron Monastery named Gala. At 18 years old, is the oldest main character and will always take things realistically. Sometimes he will even seem to be the only one who realizes that something is not right and demands explanations, or acts as the moral compass of the group. At the beginning, Gala reluctantly merges with the Ra-Seru Ozma, primarily because the Seru made him an orphan and also because the teachings of Byron forbid the use of them. But as the story progresses, Gala will learn to trust Ozma and also befriends Vahn and Noah, whom he initially treated very coldly because of the Seru they wore. Anyway, following Gala, we'll be introduced to another important character, Songi. From the first time I saw him, my first thought was, damn, this guy's gonna be a real pain in the ass. And in fact, Songi is Gala's lifelong rival and will become one of the main antagonists and nemesis of our heroes. And you know what? I like him, because he's so evilly cartoonish. Unlike the other JRPGs, Legend of Legaia offers this limited and cohesive party, and it's a choice that I really appreciated. See, these protagonists seem to have come out of a fighting game, and over the course of the adventure we'll see establish a strong friendship and trust between them. Speaking of characterization and personal growth, well, Vahn and Gala won't have any particular developments. The first is almost a classic silent protagonist, but from time to time there will be multiple choices in some dialogues, which will have different outcomes, and there will be also an important flashback from his childhood. Gala, on the other hand, will always be this brave and resolute fighter, and will have the opportunity to witness a key event from the past in his historic rivalry with Songi. By the way, the one who really embarks on a concrete path of growth and discovery is Noah. The girl, sometimes called a feral kid, is just 12 years old and has practically grown up isolated from the world and suddenly finds herself with the task of saving it. Noah will always be at the center of comic skits, in which she shows her naivety and even the lack of knowledge of the basic principles of human relationships, and is therefore often scolded. And yes, many of these scenes are really embarrassing, but it's all quite justified, and at the end of the story we'll definitely see her kinda grown and matured. Besides, her mysterious origins will also connect to past events of the main story, which reserves some surprises. The overall story of the game is quite compelling. It's an alternation of silly and tragic situations, in which our heroes will meet various colorful people and sometimes witness unfortunate events. On one occasion, having saved a crumbling settlement unintentionally led to the ruin of another, which they had to save immediately afterwards. I admit that twist left me very amazed, and also a bit horrified by the wickedness of the writers. In addition to reviving the Genesis trees throughout the continents, Vahn and friends will have to destroy also the mist generators, which are a sign that the mist has someone behind its creation and propagation. In fact, aside from Songi, there are other main villains, such as the aforementioned Zeto in the Prologue, and, avoiding spoilers, I'll just make an honorable mention about the Delilas family. I'm talking about this trio of, ninja wannabes, who exhibit these silly poses for which they are rightly mocked, though the battle with them is a lot of fun. Oh yes, the battles. Well, returning to the topic, the game includes the classic random encounters, which luckily are not that many, but can only be reduced much later in the adventure by equipping an accessory. As I said, the hearts are all registered in a consultable list, and after the normal ones there are the hyper hearts, which are practically elemental attacks. The fire for Vahn, wind for Noah, and thunder for Gala. These particular hearts are learned through elemental books that can only be obtained in certain places reached throughout the story. They can be found in chests or given by beating certain bosses, and there are 3 for each hero. Next up are the super hearts. These hearts are very powerful, but there's a big problem. They are not memorized in the list. I mean, you have to write them down on a piece of paper. When I discovered it, I was very disappointed, and after some hours of trying, I preferred to read them on the internet. Yes, I know, I'm terrible. The super hearts can require a lot of art points and do a lot of damage, and are surpassed by the miracle hearts, which are 1 for each character. These cost 99 APs and require 9 blocks in the combo bar. That means they can be performed in advanced stages of the game. In addition to the melee attacks, which are, let's say, the focus of the battle system, the game also includes magic, but in a peculiar way. See, it's like a monster taming game. By beating the Ra-Seru in battle, there's a chance that the hero will absorb them and make them summonable in battle, consuming magic points. There are in total over 20 acquirable Ra-Seru that can be leveled up to the 3rd level by using them continuously. We'll see an increase in damage and also a greater possibility of inflicting status changes, which, however, rarely have effect on bosses. By the way, personally for most of the game, I mainly relied on the Ra-Seru with healing capabilities, and then concentrated on those that deal elemental damage very late in the adventure. For example, do you see this one called Kemaro? It has moderate MP cost and does very high damages. I easily beat quite a few bosses thanks to him. Overall, this game never stops to amaze me. Now, I have to make a point about the difficulty of the game. Without my knowledge, the NDSC release is surprisingly harder than the original Japanese and PAL versions. That is, all enemies have up to doubled defenses, they inflict more damage, and give less experience points and money. The friend that suggested me this game told me that it was very easy to beat, but that's because he played the Italian version. And with this, I'm not saying that the game becomes unplayable and has perhaps broken bosses. On the contrary, it's very balanced, and I had my first game over when I was more than halfway through, in the specific against this one that has a chargeable attack that hurts like hell. But then I just had to equip accessories which increased the defense against the dark element, and it went down quite easily. Also, using the Spirit Command increases defenses for 1 turn, and it's vital to exploit when a boss is charging his signature move. The boss fight that made me suffer the most is this one, in which you have only 4 turns to beat this creature before it casts a special attack that knocks out everyone. I tried this fight at least 20 times. In this game, the accessories play an important role. Find and equip the best ones help immensely. For example, many bosses have physical attack chains, and equip the item that increases the chances of blocking them is a great boon. Talking about the exploration and the level design, Legend of Legaia plays pretty standard. Most of the dungeons are not that huge, and there are occasional puzzles, like in this part, which involves these colored and electrified doors to deactivate with the corresponding levers. Other times we're required to find key items that can be used to destroy obstacles or to open the way in a special manner, but are always very easy to find. The most banal puzzle of the game, I think, is that at the Soul Tower, in which I was required to buy the sorrow bread and feed it to... these special chests. I'm not joking. This freaking bread costs a lot, but can also be acquired by spending the points won from minigames at the Muscle Dome, which I'll talk about later. On one occasion, the party members split up and took different paths. Then they had to interact with different mechanisms in order to clear the way for each other until they reunited at the end of the dungeon. Unfortunately, this section lasted very little, and afterwards there's even the usual dungeon based on teleporters. You have no idea how much I hate these things. As someone said, teleporters are cheap level design, and I agree with him. The game also features this classic world map, where the movement speed is, a bit slow, but quite soon we'll be able to use the item called Door of Wind, which permits to teleport to visited locations and save a lot of time. As I said, the character design of Legend of Legaia didn't promise much, and I'm quite picky about these things, but then, once immersed in the game, I was able to admire many surprising qualities. First of all, the game is almost totally full 3D, and just some elements of the scenery are two-dimensional. These environments may not have the immensity of those seen in Grandia or its small interactions, but still there are various well-detailed and inspired areas, and just saying, at the beginning of the game I spent several minutes just walking around Rim Elm. During the, let's say, exploration mode, the characters' models have this chibi/super deformed style that can be misleading, and for many NPCs they recycled the same simplistic models, but I noticed how often the main characters have different expressions in dialogues or cutscenes, and it's a nice touch that enriches the immersion. However, the game shows its best during the battles. What I love the most is that all characters' equipment is visible on their bodies. There are not only different weapons, but also many protections for the head and torso and the legs and feet. It's mesmerizing. It's a stylistic choice that impressed me a lot, and that I would have liked to see more often in other games, but unfortunately, most developers want to maintain the iconic look of their characters and limit themselves to changing the weapons in hand. And together with the main equipments, another nice touch are the Ra-Seru, which throughout the story level up at specific moments, and consequently their appearance also changes, and they become bigger and cooler. What also surprised me is the complexity of the enemies. See, these monsters are very well animated, and what impressed me the most is how they react to the blows. I mean, they really suffer those punches and kicks. They even get knocked down and then get up again. Just like indeed a fighting game. Some of the enemies can even cast special abilities like this spinning wheel of cards called Fatal Decision, where every card can inflict a status change or even instant death. And similar to this, there's Death Game, in which we'll have to pick a hidden card that can kill the caster or even the targeted protagonist, and that's amazing. And then there are the spectacular special attacks of the bosses. Many of them are freaking pompous and don't even take too much time. On the other hand, the summonable Ra-Seru are also incredible, yes, though various animations are quite long and can be unnerving. But, as I always say, those were different times, and I don't consider it a big problem. In my opinion, this game can be considered on par with the contemporary Final Fantasy VIII. Well, at least the whole part about the battles. I think it has nothing to envy of it, except perhaps the magnificent FMVs that in Legend of Legaia are just a handful. And one last thing I appreciated is that the heroes have various victory poses that last very little and give more variety at the end of battles. This game also owns a rich and varied soundtrack composed by Michiru Oshima, with the exception of the track named Kara's Theme by Koei Tanaka. By the way, the overall soundtrack is a great combination of themes and styles for every serious or silly situation that occurs throughout the long adventure. It also features some energetic battle themes that put a lot of emphasis on the most important battles, such as those with song or the so-called Disciples of the Mist. Personally, I was expecting something more from the final battle track. I mean, it's not bad at all. I was expecting something more epic. That's all. But beyond this opinion of mine, the soundtrack is a respectable work of which I don't remember any boring or out-of-place compositions, and can be appreciated as much as the works of Uematsu, Iwadare or Mitsuda. I also appreciated a lot the work on the sound effects during the fights, which are really well done and impactful. Furthermore, there are voiced lines in Japanese, and aside from the simple grunts in the execution of attacks or received blows, there are proper phrases while performing the various arts and the victory poses, and the same goes for the enemies. However, I discovered that many sentences were cut in the US and the European versions of the game, and it's a shame, because they give a deeper characterization to Vahn, Noah and Gala. Apart the long main quest, there are several minigames that permit to win coins, exchangeable for various prices, such as powerful accessories and also the Soru bread that can be sold for a lot of money, useful for buying the equipment that always costs a lot. The classic slots are first available in the city of Idna and are the fastest way to acquire many coins when we enter the bonus game, where the central line of numbers are multiplied up to 1000 points. At the Muscle Dome there's also this sort of arcade fighting game, called Baka Fighter, based on the rock, paper and scissors scheme against a series of opponents who have attack patterns to memorize. It has been my least favorite, by the way. The most notorious minigame is the Coliseum Zone, that is a battle arena with a series of 1 versus 1 battles and has 3 selectable difficulty levels. Each level adds various handicaps of increasing difficulty, from the simplest non-use of recovery items, to no equipment on Vahn, finishing to not even magic. However, the accessories will always be allowed. Personally, I used to beat only the easiest level several times, because it was enough to acquire the coins I needed, though I read that the highest level compensates with 1 hell of an accessory, but good luck with that. Good luck. There's even a minigame dedicated to Noah at the Soul Fever Disco, which is a classic dancing game based on QTs, and if we make her enter the dance contest and win, we'll get only once a huge money prize along with some useful items. The last minigame available is fishing, which I tried only near the end of the game. To fish, we'll need the rods, which are free and scattered around the game world, and the lures purchasable at Vidna by spending coins. You know what? Fishing is actually fun, though the biggest and more remunerative fishes are very rare and difficult to catch. When the fish bites, we'll have to pay attention to the tension meter, that when it's full, will make the line snap and lose both the fish and the lure in use. In almost 2 hours of trying, I caught this big and rare fish only once, and it's not even by far the best catch I could have made. See, this activity requires a lot of time and patience, but as I said in the Final Fantasy VIII review, I've never been a big fan of minigames, but still I appreciate the effort put into this game. Legend of Legaia lasted me over 50 hours, and after its satisfying ending I felt a strong sense of wonder and surprise, because it's truly a great JRPG that went beyond my expectations, and of which I really didn't know anything about, and I kinda feel ashamed. In my opinion, this classic is worthy of being in every top of the genre released on PS1, because it's seriously a complete product from every point of view. In summary, First, it has a captivating story that mixes serious and facetious, with several interesting twists. Then, the battle system is full of cool ideas, and is very reminiscent of that of Xenogears, perhaps even done better. Continuing, the difficulty level of the American version has, yes, some spikes here and there, but it's still very balanced and challenging. The soundtrack by Michiru Oshida is very good, and the graphic compartment owns a mind-boggling attention to the 3D models and their animations in battles. And there are also some optional bosses, one of which is very badass, but I won't spoil it. Speaking of flaws, well, the overall character design is, yes, a bit blunt. The random encounters are the usual big nuisance for the most players, and certain plot points are not that brilliant, but you see, these are defects that can be found everywhere, even in those most renowned games that are usually untouchable. To finish, Legend of Legaia is a classic that I'm happy I've discovered and played, and I really hope this video will convince someone to play it too. As always, a warm thanks to all viewers, and see you in the next entry.